Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here. Before I begin, very briefly, may I ask, was anybody here on Wednesday in the session on digital inclusion? We have, okay, only about 4 or 5 people. Okay, so I can maybe touch on a couple of the points again. I guess it could still be useful. My name is Adam Lane. I deal with policy and partnerships in the Kenya office of Huawei. As Grace has said, we operate in every country in the world, especially in Africa, where I think we're one of the biggest players in the infrastructure for both telecoms, mobile, fixed networks, even mobile money solutions, as well as courses, digitization for government agencies, for banks, for many other businesses, e-learning, e-health, all that kind of stuff. But we also have cloud, we also have solar power, we also, of course, have the consumer division as well. We've been here, I think, over 25 years. I think 1998 was the first time we started operating in Africa. I think we're quite proud of the contribution we've made. Of course, we're not alone, and we work mostly with customers, and we work mostly in the behind the scenes, business to business space. One of the things I wanted to mention in terms of infrastructure was, I guess, around policies, and then maybe the actual technical side as well. I know this is kind of a policy space, and there's been some progress, I think, in the policy space of the one area network, something like this. I think in East Africa regions making some progress, to reduce roaming costs and things. I think there's still a long way to go. I think though most countries in this region still face very similar challenges in terms of the high cost of infrastructure deployment. A lot of this is because of the high cost of power or instability of power, which of course is the biggest cost actually of most of the ICT infrastructure is the running cost, which is often power. And of course that ideally it should also of course be green and renewable power as well. The second one of course is the cost of laying fiber. Fiber is not just fiber to the homes or fiber to the business, but also of course fiber to reach base stations for mobile sites as well. And of course fiber is a very important backbone and transmission networks. The cost of laying it can be expensive, especially because of frequent cuts and destruction of fiber, and of course the high cost of way leaves. And also the unpredictable nature of way leaves and the very variable nature of way leaves. Certainly in Kenya it varies county by county, and it can change dramatically year by year, and it's a monthly or annual fee, so even once you lay it, you're continuing to pay it. But we think there's a lot that can be done. I think one of the focus in Kenya is around affordable housing. And Kenya, I think, is probably one of the most advanced internet penetration rates in the East Africa region. So now the focus is really not just on mobile coverage. Actually, a large proportion of the population has mobile network coverage in Kenya. Not everyone, but most have the network coverage. So the now focus, I think, is on two things. One is the affordability of using that network. And secondly is around expanding basic network to make it more advanced network coverage, especially say unlimited internet, whether that's through fiber or through say fixed wireless access. And that requires relatively affordable spectrum, and it requires a collaboration on the fiber infrastructure as well. So in the affordable housing space, I know we worked a lot with industry in Kenya to help mandate all new buildings in Kenya have to be fiber ready. So I also encourage those of you from other parts of the region to also look at the building code that Kenya gazetted last May. You can find it on the National Construction Authority website. And it's come into effect this May, so around about this time. It would be something that we encourage all countries to take that kind of approach. There's different ways of mandating that kind of infrastructure. A building code is a great opportunity because of course it's a requirement for every single building to get its license to be built and then obviously to be approved to be used. But of course building codes are not updated very frequently. In fact, the last time Kenya updated its building code was, I think, in colonial times. So it doesn't happen often. So if that chance is not coming up in Uganda or Tanzania, you can maybe look for other ways to make that requirement into the policies. It can really help reduce costs of installing fiber, reduce the hassle and the time and disturbances, and also really support innovation and competition, especially for smaller players, because it reduces the amount of effort to install fiber into housing and apartments. And if you just mandate kind of ducting, then of course it's much easier to have multiple players all using the same ducting. So that's something I wanted to mention. We do believe, and I mentioned a bit on Wednesday, that now the focus needs to be on affordability and quality of service, not only on network coverage. So we're encouraging there to be better standards and targets for quality of service for all networks, not just mobile, but also fiber, also maybe satellite, also other forms of technologies, and reporting on that quality of service and on affordability. I'm not aware of any national or regional targets for affordability for internet, but I think there should be some. I know the ITU, the Alliance for Affordable Internet, and others do have these targets. So it would be good to have some specific here. As I said on Wednesday, not just average targets, but targets for kind of targeted for lower income groups as well, right, to really bridge the digital divide, because an average is not actually a good way of setting a target, I believe. And then the other thing I wanted to mention around data centers and cloud, that's also a very, very important part of infrastructure. Nowadays, there's been really good progress, especially amongst the coastal countries in this region, which I guess is Kenya and Tanzania. Somalia also is well placed with lots of undersea cables too. But I think as a region, and there's a big discussion, I think, in the regional economic blocks around how to collaborate more on data centers and cloud, because that also affects the cost of internet access as well. So maybe I'll stop there for now. Thank you, Grace.
Thanks a lot, Adam. I forgot to ask Robert, what time do we have for this panel so that I manage the, because it's about managing time, Okay. No. I think, okay. Now, Gbenga, you've just listened to Adam and the issues is raised about affordability, about access. I love the fact that we're already discussing the need to make it compulsory to have fiber in any new buildings. Because I think especially like this country we've suffered, because you come today, Zuku has dug trenches, it's covered. Tomorrow, Safaricom has done the same, you cover. You come the third day, Airtel has done the same, you cover. And you never know when this is gonna stop, especially knowing that we have new people coming in. So how can digital governance be aligned with broader development goals, such as inclusive growth and poverty reduction?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's on. Now it's working. That's I'm now connected. I'm included now. Thanks. And I'm glad to hear, that Kenya has updated its building code. I think this is something that other countries need to learn from. This whole idea of getting the building ready for broadband is really important, because how you design, the reason we ended up, obviously, as a continent depending on not so reliable connections is because a lot of countries messed up terrestrial infrastructure at the beginning. I'm Nigerian, so I should know. We were putting together the broadband plan for Nigeria in 2013, and one of the challenges, like Grace mentioned, that we found was that not only were different companies laying cables at different times and breaking the road at different times, governments of the subnationals were also charging exorbitant fees for private sector to lay cable. And I thought that was weird, because if someone is laying cable to your state, it is a win-win scenario. But I'm glad to hear that we're making progress with all that. And in terms of how digital governance connects directly with this, real life development goals, I want to speak very quickly to two things. One is what we will call inclusive growth. And I say inclusive growth because we talk a lot about rights, we talk about inclusion, and one of the things that we at Paradigm Initiative have come to very strongly, discuss in the last few months, particularly in the last few months, is how inclusion is actually a human rights issue. So we talk a lot about digital rights, we talk a lot about responsibility, obligations, and things like that. But if you look at what happened during COVID, when people who didn't have access were not in school, could not collect to families, could not do any business, then you realize that anyone who is cut off is actually being denied a lot of things. But beyond that is also that as we continue to talk about, making progress with inclusion, and we're measuring the numbers, we have to be careful by, with not measuring growth in terms of just the data, but in terms of the lived experience. And I say this because, I'm a trained engineer and I've done a lot of work in policy, and I know we love to boast that, we've connected 350 kilometers of fiber from Lagos to Kaduna, but until the people who are connected to it are able to experience it. And I say this, we can do all the adverts all in the world and say we've done inclusion, but until people experience it, it is definitely not inclusion. And I think it's our job in our own sector, especially not just civil society, government. We talk a lot about digital issues, and when we have these conversations, it is tempting when you now talk about real development to say that, what, digital is nice to have, and you have to sort water, you have to sort transportation, you have to sort all this. But I think we have a big job on our hands now, and that job is creating a direct connection between, as I've described in some places, between bread and broadband. That when we have conversations about link cables, when we have conversations about inclusion of digital spaces, it is directly connected to livelihoods, to jobs, to food. And because if we don't make that argument, then certain governments, not even at the national level, at the sub-national level, will have to prioritize. And when they prioritize, they will prioritize literally bread and say, let broadband come later. But we need to make a direct connection. And I think that direct connection we can already see in some of the experiences we've had with job creation. Which part of the economy is creating the fastest and the most reliable jobs right now? Somebody has a mobile phone, they don't have to apply for anything. Just yesterday, some of you may have seen the video, a group of 6 Nigerian comedians are on their way to London. And not only is everybody jumping to sponsor them, to give them money, an airline gave them, business class tickets to fly because they were going to do content, create content and post on TikTok. And as far as the airline is concerned, that is equivalent of sponsorship money. Venues are giving them, things like that. And with a mobile phone, you're creating jobs. And I think we need to establish this particular connection, that this is one sector of the economy. It's shown in numbers. If you look at the GDP contribution of the telecom sector, even though we need to recalculate that because we talk mostly about the telecom sector. We're not looking at the content creation part. We're not looking at, the entire gig economy. We need to look at that because that is what leads to job creation. But there's a caution here, and I'll close with this. It is that as we do this, there is a natural temptation, especially in policy making, for us to think more in terms of regulating these new things. Everybody is talking about AI regulation right now. And my argument is that if we're not careful, we will go back to the days when we almost regulated voice over IP out. Many of us may not remember this. When Skype came, telecom companies were not very happy because Skype was voice over IP, was going to eat their lunch. And I sat in rooms where regulators were discussing banning voice over IP. In fact, in a country not too far from here, I was apprehended at the airport in Addis for using Skype because at that time it was illegal. And we have to be very careful that regulation and policy making must support innovation. When we have conversations about digital, when we talk about digital inclusivity and connectivity, policy must support that. If policy can't support that, then please, let's get out of the way and let this work be done so that at least the connection between digital and lived experience can be seen. And we've seen this in the lives of many people. I can tell you stories for days. There was a young man, famous, that we trained in 2007 in one of the programs that we have in, called the Life Program in the Slums. And this young man could not, in fact, he had not seen a computer, he didn't know how to use a computer. He started using the computer. He started using Microsoft Excel. For some reason, he took to Microsoft Excel. And that Microsoft Excel was what got him his first internship. That internship just happened to be with the UK Deputy High Commission. He got a job with the Deputy High Commission. As I speak to you today, Famous is a senior manager at KPMG in New Jersey, stolen from Nigeria to the US to go and work with them because he had, improved skills, all because of simple training in IT, learning how to use a spreadsheet, and we can multiply that by millions across the continent to have better lived experiences.
Thanks so much, Gbenga. Policy must support innovation. We'll skip Paul for now and go on straight to Honorable Safari, at least because there is a concern of policy and innovation and the two needing to speak to each other. So what policies and regulations are needed to protect citizens' data and ensure cybersecurity?
Hello. As in DRC, unlike our sister and brother in Uganda, we speak Swahili, even if it's not good, but we try. And we speak French, but I try to speak English, even if my English is not as good as your English. But I think it's better to avoid some translation issue, to have the majority to understand. Okay, so in terms of law, we have to see there's different approach in making law. On data protection and cyber security, we have first of all our national law, but we have also some regional and continental law. Like for the cyber security, we have already the Malabo Convention, which entered in force in I think in June 2023. That's something that can help all the African countries to have something like a legislative background, or they can start to work with it in the space of cyber security. For the data protection, many countries in Africa already have their law. I think here in Kenya we have the law, in Congo we have the law, but a part of the law, we have also to have a body that will manage that data protection process. And that's something we lack in Congo. We have the law, but we don't have the body, the authority. And that's a gap, that's a very gap. And we need those kind of body authority, because the data actually, we cannot think about data only on country level. We need to protect those data, yes, but we need also to offer access to those data to those people who need those data. Yesterday I was in a AI summit where I saw some young Kenyan working in the AI space, and for them to work, they need really data. They need to access data, not only data from Kenya, but they will need also data from DRC, they will need data from Rwanda, from Burundi, from Uganda, so they can build better application, not a local Kenyan application, but a global application. For that things to work, we need law. Each country have the specific value to protect and put in the law, to customize the law, but we need those authority to work together, to cooperate. In case there is a need of data sharing, there will be a way of accessing the data. And on my view, we should see us as African what we have to put in the data protection. There's different approach, like if you see from the EU a perspective, them they put in priority the privacy. They have to protect the privacy. Different from the US, where they will put most law that will put first the innovation capability, will put in first their business progress. As Africa, we are still behind. We are still behind in terms of economic development. We still to give space to our young, to our entrepreneur, to get more access and put and make a lot of progress in innovation. If we put boundary in terms of protection and making just a copy paste from the EU, I think in when we was in Kyoto, we had a meeting with the European Parliament, because there was willing African to have their same law like their law. They are making fight between them and US and China in terms of regulation. So they want African to support them by having the same law like them. But that's not our interest. So we have to focus on which are our value. We have also our value. We was in the meeting here in last month for PIN, where we say Ubuntu. That's our value. That's our African value. So we have to have those laws, but customized, not only on country level, but we have to think on regional level. We had the speaker who speak Murenzi. He have made me some. He have teach me some good news, like in the in the region, East African region, there's something that they are working on them, like for the roaming, data sharing. We have to think also how we can start that kind of process on the regional level, because sometimes some countries are behind, but once things move fast on the regional level, even those countries who are behind, they can easily catch up. I think that's my point of view.
Thank you so much, Honorable Safari. I think we'll now come to Paul, and I'm also going to be asking my panelists to make their contributions succinct, so that we have time to take it back to the floor for questions. Paul, as somebody who works at GIZ, and GIZ has been known to support development of tech in communities, digital skilling, cyber hygiene, and digital literacy for women. How, please share with us, how can digital literacy be improved among citizens and government officials?
Thank you very much, Gigi. As you have said, my name is Paul Kithinji. I am a data policy advisor with GIZ, particularly GIZ African Union portfolio. The portfolio is a result of a bilateral agreement between the German government and the African Union. I'm very happy to be here because I see very many familiar faces. To your question, I think I'll touch on what has been discussed. First is identifying these particular needs and reducing them down to policy directives. As we all know, the government moves through policies and laws. So for us to actually incentivize or actually implement these policy directives on digital literacy, they have to be policy recommendations. As part of my role, we facilitate the harmonization of AU policies to regional, continental, regional, national policies. And there's one key policy that I would like to touch on, which is the digital transformation strategy. And I'm very happy to be part of the team that has supported the development of the regional data governance policy framework for East Africa. I have colleagues who are also working on a digital transformation strategy. And some of those things that are espoused are touched directly on digital skilling and digital literacy. So from a regional standpoint, I think there is that vision, there is that impetus by the community and its partner states. Down to the national level, I think there needs to be a reflection or a harmonization of the same. I'd like to see digital transformation strategies for all partner states, right? I would like to see some changes, you know, in science, technology and innovation policy frameworks, ICT development frameworks, educational frameworks that call for prioritization of digital skilling and digital literacy. The other thing that would be interested in seeing and would greatly support is investment by various actors in mainstreaming digital literacy. Some of these incentives could be inculcated in our budgetary processes. Again, from the policy and the legal background, you could then now provide your resources. Make it a priority for your funding when you're doing your budgetary allocations on a yearly basis. Put money aside for digital skilling, digital literacy for government employees. And a quick and sure way from the experiences that we've had as GIZ doing capacity building within the region, incentivize it through continuous professional development programs that would then benefit these government employees who would then take up these initiatives, knowing at the end of the day there is a certain benefit that then accrues to me, and in that space then they can deliver better within their roles. I think there's also a space, and as you've said, rightfully GIZ is very committed to supporting such initiatives, leveraging off the relationships with development partners. I think being cognizant of changes in policy, both by development partners and quote-unquote the beneficiaries. We are told not to call them beneficiaries. But ideally, trying to see how best to leverage through those relationships, trying to meet these policy objectives by sitting down and collaborating and designing programs and initiatives that mainstream digital literacy. And it's very interesting that some of our colleagues here in the room, that we've been able to do so, through zero-day events at various platforms such as Kenya IGF, DRIF, FIFA, and such opportunities are open both to the civil society, academia, government, in order to design programs that will allow both the public and the government officials to get some form of digital skilling. In the area of investment, as Adam has rightly pointed out, there needs to be some considerable investment made in the areas of, I want to say, meaningful connectivity. So it's just not enough to have a mobile phone that has access to the internet, but you need meaningful connectivity. That means that you have to have some power, that you have to have some low-cost technology that is, very easily accessible. So there needs to be more investment by government, and I want to say by private and public sector, to make this technology, make this access a reality. Let's put money where our mouth is. We want to always issue out, apps and solutions to everything, but without the right incentives, without the reductions to barrier of entries, it will not be particularly possible. And just to borrow what Gbenga said, let's connect the bread with the broadband, right? I think it's very important. That's something that, if you allow me, I'll steal. I think the other thing is strengthening existing digital literacy programs. I think, as I've said, these platforms, these events that happen on a yearly basis could be the perfect venues to have government officials come in and get some form of literacy delivered to them in form of very short, very precise capacity building efforts. And again, maybe tied to a certificate, that then could mean that you have undergone some form of training. I think, lastly, I think we need to invest more in online courses that meet an urgent need, particularly within the digital literacy space. Online platforms such as Atingi and very many others are there for this particular purpose. So it's very important that we I think want to promote the use of these online platforms to bridge that gap. And I think, just to reiterate, GIZ is primarily committed, both at a continental, regional, and national level, to work with various partners to make this a reality. So if you have any ideas, if you have any projects, feel free to reach out. If it's not particularly the project that I work in, there's another portfolio, there's another project that might be of benefit to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul. We're going to do a second round of questions, and I will ask my panelists to utilize exactly 2 minutes to respond to that. And we come to you, Gbenga, just listening to what Paul has said. Paul, I like the idea of calling people beneficiaries as opposed to, calling them partners as opposed to beneficiaries, because if you look at that relationship, really it benefits both ways. So, you know, as beneficiaries, we also contribute to your work, and when you give us money, we also make you strong. So really, I like that. So Gbenga, you know, we have been in this space for a while, and one of the things that we push and is part of IGF is the whole question of participation. And so what strategies can you suggest which can promote greater citizen, which in your opinion could promote greater citizen engagement and participation through digital platforms?
Thank you. You know, now that you said digital platforms, you've triggered you've triggered something, because there's a whole lot around platform governance that I think is important that we address, even if I only have 90 seconds. I think the first is that the civic space across the continent and beyond is shrinking. Unfortunately, the last standing civic space is digital platforms. But unfortunately, some of the platforms themselves are shrinking spaces. What Twitter did, and I want to call out Twitter, obviously, with their human rights team, is not exactly what we need right now. Because we need spaces where people can do what they can't do offline without being harassed or arrested or even killed, to be able to do that online. So it's really important. And if we want people to participate in these processes, we have to make sure that nation states, and as they now call platforms, cloud nations, ensure that when people come to these platforms, to these spaces, they can be sure of their safety. So I think two key things for me. One is that we need to celebrate the small wins. I think we're too busy at times getting work done that we forget to pat ourselves on the back. Participation has increased significantly. Ford mentioned earlier about 2003 in Geneva, World Summit on Information Society. I was there as a member of the Youth Caucus, and we literally had to, at times, badge our way into some sessions, into some meetings, because you were the youth, on the fringes. But right now, youth is mainstream in many of our processes. I think we need to celebrate the small wins, but of course also realize that there's a lot more that we need to do in terms of inclusion. And we need to get more creative, and this is my second and final point. We need to get more creative and taking the message to where the people are. We write a lot of beautiful reports, and I love these reports. One of the reasons why PAIN converts our annual report, Londa, into a short film is the same reason. We need more people outside our usual suspects to understand what we're talking about, because we speak a lot of jargon to ourselves, and out there, people are like, what are they saying? Well, let's let them enjoy it. We need creative communications, so that celebrate the wins, but also creative communications. And this is the first place where I am saying this. So in July, Paradigm Initiative will be launching a digital inclusion board game for this same reason, so that people who would not normally come to the conferences, who would not normally be on the online spaces, can, in the comfort of their homes, engage in a very joyful and enjoyable process of learning about rights and inclusion and winning prizes at the same time for it.
Wonderful. You've actually just done 2 minutes, which is you might get into Guinness Book of Records, because you are a storyteller. So Adam, how can private partnerships be leveraged to accelerate digital transformation, not just among citizens, but also in government services. And I want to say that when we see, you know, we get a message, or we see the, you know, parliamentarians using Gmail, the minister, of course he's not, but just government offices using web-based addresses. How can that be accelerated so that, you know, we have that transformation in the different services?
That's a very big question. On the latter issue, you know, in private sector, we take data protection and security, I think, very seriously. You know, we are regulated. I think the majority of this region has data protection commissioners and data protection laws. Whether government agencies are implementing as strongly, you know, where we see lots of government documents circulating on WhatsApp that they don't think they should be there, and we see them using personal email addresses. I don't think they should be using that either. I think in private sector we take it more seriously. We have intellectual property, we have sensitive information on pricing and customers and things we don't want to be shared. So I think governments also have to learn a bit from that. We really emphasize the importance of standards and implementing standards, having standards, you know, certified, audited, and so on. I know in government they've done that in the past for some of health and safety and quality sometimes and other things, but I think a lot more around ICT standards, around cybersecurity, data protection. I think there's even an AI standard being developed by the ISO as well that needs to be brought and adapted, maybe localized, but then really implemented. That would really help. And private sector can collaborate with public sector on this, because I think we know more often about standards than public sector. We see a lot of progress, I think, with revenue sharing models, which I think is a good thing generally, but you know, there's some issues sometimes with procurement and transparency around those. But we think government hasn't got unlimited investment. So we think there is innovation in business models that's possible, things like revenue share models. You know, if they're saving money for government, saving money for the users of a service, then there's no reason that those can't work, but they need to be fairly procured and also transparent around that. The other thing I wanted to mention is around data. I think John also will talk about this aspect, but I think there's still a huge amount of data that's locked up. Public sector, academic, non-profit, that needs to be available for private sector to access and use fairly, responsibly, with anonymization or whatever. If you want to develop meaningful solutions, you need data about your users, data around the needs, the challenges, the problems, and use that data, with health data, education data, to develop solutions. And it's very hard to get that data. It needs to be done responsibly, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean it needs to be kept locked up, whether it's digitized or not digitized. And for me, and I'll end here, that's probably the biggest opportunity we have in this region, to get access to that data, share it within the ecosystem, like fairly and responsibly, and leverage on that data to develop a local startup ecosystem, research and academia ecosystem, and develop really meaningful solutions that will benefit everyone in delivering better services to all, by government or by NGOs or by social enterprises or by private sector or whatever. So I think it's the biggest opportunity. Thank you. Is that 2 minutes or more or less?
You've also tried, I think, slightly 3. So we are also competing on who, I think we should have a present on who will keep time. So, Honorable Safari, back to you. What regional frameworks or cooperation mechanisms are necessary to facilitate cross-border digital governance? And you have 2 minutes starting now.
I hope I'll make it. For the cross-border data sharing or governance, the digital governance, we need to think our other stakeholder work cross-border. Like if you speak, you are from the telecom, they have to exchange data for the roaming and do the clearing. Same for the bank, they have to do the clearing between them. And also for the data governance, we need to have a space where all those authority, data protection authority, can meet, can exchange, can also cooperate, not on the high level, but from those level of the staff who really need to approve or exchange data and assure that the privacy and the security of the data are there. So we need to put in place a clearing agency, a mechanism at the regional level, like for the East Africa community, since already the Commission is working on those kind of law framework, as it is done for the financial part. They have to do the same from the data, because data doesn't have a border. There's no border for data. If you put border on data, you will, it's not the kind of internet we want. We want the same internet for everyone, and data have to cross all over our country for our own benefit, but we have to make sure that every country is safe, is secure, and approve the way the data of their citizens are being used or are being processed in the other country. And for that, we have to put in place such kind of clearing mechanism between the country, and only a regional body can do that. Like for East Africa community, we have the Commission on their level. They have to put in place the mechanism where they will have to be in touch with every responsible of data protection in each country. I think 2 minutes, okay?
Exactly 2 minutes. Thank you so much. And finally, before we open it up to the floor, it's back to you, Paul. What measures are needed to ensure the sustainability and scalability of digital initiatives?
Thank you. I'll try and keep it under 2 minutes. I think number one, let's mainstream digital skill and digital governance through policy. It's very important. In terms of sustainability. Number two, in terms of sustainability, I think we need to have more collaboration with the private sector and government, because a digital literate workforce is beneficial both to the government and the private sector. So I think more collaboration, more incentives, more programs need to be designed and implemented. I think the other thing that in terms of scalability, I think we need to then strengthen already existing digital literacy programs, try and scale, you know, Kenya School of Internet Governance, the African School of Internet Governance, have more people attend those schools, and particularly government officials, because if they are educated, then you will see the result in policy, and that will be a sure way of achieving this. And I think the other final thing is, in terms of scaling, let's redesign programs suited particularly for specific audiences. Let's just not have a homogeneous approach to digital skilling. Let's tailor products that are specific to governments, specific to citizenry, specific to civil society, academia, the technical community and such. Yeah.
That was even 1.5 minutes. So thank you so much, Paul. I love your points, especially on the School of Internet Governance, that we probably need to tailor that to parliamentarians, maybe to government officials, if we also expect to see change, because change also will come if they understand what it is that we are pushing for. Now, time for questions. Can I see by a show of hands how many people have questions? Okay, where is team microphone? Who is bringing the microphone? Okay, let's see from that end, because we are going to cut it at some 1. These 2, please come to the front here. We are not going to be taking the microphone round. Indulge stand there, then they'll queue behind you, like we do in ICANN and in Global IGF. This, okay, number 3, please queue there. This section, yes, there is a lady, please queue behind there. as number 4. No, you can actually queue here, then they'll bring the microphone number 4. Okay, do we have a question from that end? Okay, we bring it back here. I thought I saw 2 hands. Okay, 4 questions, and that's it. So Ndegwa, hand over the microphone. Oh, okay. Oh, it's somebody who is, all right. Yeah. Oh, she's translating. Okay. So what I will request you to allow for panelists to be able to engage with your questions is to frame your question in a succinct way. Please don't workshop your question, okay? Just ask the question. Okay, we have somebody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, panelists. I have a question. The question is on the issue about internet. You know, fiber is quite expensive. For example, some years back, last year probably, we had a hitch when there were the breakages in the ocean. So, you see, we get our internet from far places, and they come under the Indian Ocean with the fiber cables. And once they come in Kenya, then we are able to share our internet with countries like Uganda and other neighboring countries. So, could we have ethics that control that? My other point is on having a policy whereby the internet is meant to favor people with disability. Companies like Google, they could be able to get someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, and then that person could could contribute to know on the issues that are affecting the deaf community. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Andrew Kesarema. I just graduated recently from KC on Wednesday, so I'm grateful to be here. My question is as follows. Today, it's International Day of the Boy Child. And as such, we are getting challenges of the boy child in grassroots and cities in Kenya, in Africa, where we're losing the boy child to drugs, to gambling, to dropping out of school, and many vices. And right now, the equilibrium has flipped, where the girl child is more focused than the boy child, even in school, even in business, even in work. And they are focused, they know where they want to go. So how can we help now the boy child to reposition themselves in this day of the technology in governance, so that we don't lose them? Because if we lose them, then we are losing the focus as leaders and as government. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Yasmin Ahmed and I'm from Uganda, and I noticed that all the speakers spoke about policy and the importance of policy, and I have 2 issues I would like to ask about. The first is you can't talk policy without talking implementation. So how do we deal with the implementation gap, especially with big tech, not in our countries, but how do we get big tech to conform to our policies? Because we recently, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, we all got the data protection acts, yeah? And the question is, how do you implement data protection on big tech? Because they handle most of our data, they do data mining, you know, and how do we implement it on them? We do not, our numbers are too low to affect the bottom line, so we can't be like, we shall shut you down. So how do we do it? So yeah, I feel like that's important to, you know, discuss, even with the coming AI policies. If we do make AI policies, or when we do make them, how do we intend to implement them? I feel that this is not a conversation we have very frequently. How do we implement on big tech? And the second is, Gbenga talked about policy supporting innovation. However, I'd like to say there is a very thin line between protection, restriction, and supporting of innovation. How do we balance this? Because it's very easy to over-regulate, and that will hinder innovation. And if you under-regulate, that encourages, violation. So how do you balance? Thank you.
My name is Amos Ochenge, and you'll be amazed that the question that I wanted to ask, he has asked. Nisome hapa.
Yes, policy implementation in the biggest issue.
That was my question. Now, my second question is, I am a boda rider, and I know most of you have used boda across East Africa. How best can we use data and these policies to improve the lives of us bodas and to improve security in terms of maybe most of us, we fear bodas, right? Because we are associated with bad things, but we need to change that. And how best can we use the digital space to improve the lives of boda and to better our lives? Thank you.
I think it is so pleasing to hear that the forum has even attracted people from the gig economy, because I know that's the conversation that together with GIZ we are starting to say we engage. So thank you very much even for asking very good questions. So you had questions about security, data protection, persons with disabilities. I think I will just ask you to pick each areas that you want to respond to, so that we can finish exactly on time. And as you do that, you can also give your closing remarks, and in particular on how do we ensure that all are brought on board. I don't know who wants to start. Adam, do you want to start? You know you're in the big tech. And there is a question about the big tech.
Yeah, I guess we're big tech, but we're not like big social media tech. We're infrastructure tech primarily, and some non-social media platforms in terms of cloud, things like this. So it's a very good question. I think the data protection acts are quite good. We've seen some enforcements in Kenya. I don't know about the other countries. I guess the challenge is that outside of the data protection realm, there's a lot of other laws that also need to be developed, updated, and implemented. And right now, I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding because there's a lack of definitions, which is based on a lack of laws. So what content is allowed, what content is not allowed online. Some can be allowed, some cannot be allowed. Certain countries have got clearer guidelines, certain countries also have very fuzzy guidelines. So I think that's an important question. If we have very clear guidelines and very clear standards, it also becomes easier potentially to implement them as well. But it's a very difficult topic, just like the topic of real name accounts or linking IDs to social media accounts, just like you have IDs linked to your SIM cards in this region. I know it's also a sensitive or controversial topic as well, but it's very hard to punish individuals if the individuals can just keep creating more and more accounts without getting any actual punishment necessarily. So I think it requires a good conversation. I know it's a very difficult conversation to have. I feel like the conversation is not led to any clear definitions of standards, at least in Kenya. A lot of discussion, but not really any agreement. And I think that's not that constructive. There needs to be, I think, an agreement, some standards, some code of conduct, and so on. Then it will be easier to agree and implement them. So maybe that's one thing I would want to say. The other thing, and maybe in reference to our Boda rider, is one of the big opportunities of the gig economy is the feedback mechanism to rate people. If it's done well, it can really help. And I think that should be something that should be done. but it also is not an excuse for not punishing people for doing illegal activities. You're giving somebody a 1-star rating is fine, but if they've done something bad like steal money, take people to the wrong place, or drive dangerously, there should also be mechanisms for other punishments as well. So we shouldn't, I think, just use the feedback mechanism as an excuse for not also implementing the law. And that's also, I think, quite important. But maybe the law is not yet caught up to implementing on some of these abuses. I do feel like consumer protection laws in the region are not where they need to be. It also comes to pricing. You know, if you get a fiber cut, there's no internet, what recourse do you have, that kind of stuff. It's also an important topic that needs to be addressed. Lastly, I'll just mention maybe on PWDs. We do a lot of efforts for our devices and our own operating system to have good software support for those with disabilities. We also are really working with local startups in Kenya. We've been, since last year, having hackathons to use AI and software to develop new innovations for those with disabilities, working with government and localized specialist entities. I think there's a lot more that can be done, but I'm really optimistic. There's a huge amount that can be done now, thanks to AI, to help automatically do sign language, automatically create avatars, automatically do translation. A lot around the IoT space as well that I think can be really meaningful. And I'm actually really optimistic about where that's going in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question was about ethics of sharing internet access. The good news is there are cooperation agreements that exist. Don't forget, some countries are lucky. They have, you know, water, they have dams, and others have to rely on that. So there's an age-long cooperation agreement system that also helps with that. And I couldn't agree more, you know, with you on the fact that we need to do a lot, you know, better in terms of making our processes more inclusive. I hear my brother about the Day of the Boy Child. I'm scanning the room to find him again. Oh, great, because you're in the front. Because we've got centuries of disproportionate focus on men, I think it looks like we're favoring the girl child now. But what we're really doing is we're fixing an age-long injustice. But I think we can do that at the same time, while also making sure that, you know, boys do not suffer. But I think it's just important for us as, you know, as men, as boys, to realize that it's not that one group is being favored now. Actually, we're fixing age-long injustice. In terms of the policy, I agree 100%. There's a very thin line. When you talk about regulation, there's a thin line between trying to help and controlling. And this is also, you know, beyond regulation. But what we argue at Paradigm Initiative is that we need to move away from defining regulation as control. And we know why many governments do that. Because many of us have a history of colonialism, military dictatorship. So when it comes to regulation, we approach it with that, you know, attitude. Regulation is about creating standards. Regulation is about making sure that something works better, not controlling it. Many times we control because we're afraid, but we can create standards to make it better. And I love the fact that we have someone who is in the room and talks about border. You know, you're right. There's a reputation, not just in Kenya, in Nigeria. In fact, you know, bikes were banned in the capital city of Lagos because of some of the unfortunate incidents that happened. But I think we have a unique opportunity now, as far as the gig economy is concerned. We have built for you. We've built Uber for you. We've built Yango for you. Now we need to build with you. And I think it's a challenge to both yourselves and ourselves. We need to build together. You have the lived experience. You understand what the nuances are. Policies have been made on your behalf. I think you being in the room is amazing. And I would love, I love that Grace has mentioned already that KICTANet is doing some work on this. This is something that PIN will be more than happy, you know, to get involved with. That instead of just throwing solutions, do a hackathon for border people. I think we need to move away from that. And this time around, let the people who have the lived experience also be the ones to take charge, and we can then put appropriate technology, you know, and policy behind that to support that lived experience. So I look forward to what could come out of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gbenga. I think for me, I'll try and address the question about policy pertaining to persons living with disabilities and their ability to access the internet. In line with the question about policy, I think there needs to be a very concerted effort to make inclusive policies. And the only way to do that is to include as wide a stakeholder group as possible. Yeah, let's have all the representation from academics, civil society, the technical community, in various interest groups, and we'll arrive at a situation where each and every need is possibly met. And I think that also addresses the question about regulation, right, for innovation. The only way you can actually create regulation, not the only way, but one of the sure ways of creating regulation that doesn't stifle innovation or doesn't stifle access to technology is that you include as many people in the policy making process from the onset, so that every voice, every opinion, every perspective is taken into account. I think the question about borders, I think is a very interesting one, because as Gigi has said, we are in JZ, we are working with the gig economy to facilitate some development there. And I think the most important thing is, one, numbers. If you have an association, let that association be open to some form of capacity building. The only way you can actually challenge a position is that you know better, right? So if you want to pursue your rights, you have to know your rights. You have to be educated on the means and methods of approaching some form of recourse. And I think the last thing I'll address is a question on regulating big tech. And maybe a varied opinion is that a unified front, and no better platform than the East African AIGF, because what that means is that we can lobby through our member states to have a unified approach to regulation of big tech. And that calls for harmonization of policies, it calls for a regional approach. And what that means is that vis-a-vis when you look at Somalia with a certain population and Kenya about 50, it's easy to, to say we're not a large market. But if you look at it from an East African or a regional perspective, we're about 330 million. So that's a huge market, right? So we need to make a united approach to addressing this big tech regulation question. And yeah.
I'll start with the Boda Boda question. I'm a fan of Boda Boda. I use it a lot. And yeah, it's one of the best way I use it. When I can use Boda Boda, I would prefer the Boda Boda. But most concern of the Boda Boda is the security, okay, the safety. And for that, to fight or to cover the gap of security, we can use data. We need data for that. So with data, we can track easily. In case there's a risk of kidnapping or an accident, with data, we can know easily. If they see me as someone came from Kinshasa and they find me on the Boda in Kiambu, it will be strange. How can I come from Kinshasa and I travel a lot from here to Kiambu on the Boda? With AI, it can detect this is an unusual move, or I'm just stuck somewhere on the express road. Maybe I've made an accident. For that, we need the data. And it comes for the issue of data protection and sharing. We have to find a balance on the data protection and on sharing, because sometimes, a lot of time, we need those developers, they need a lot of data so they can train their model and provide for us better services. And that's the challenge to, on the other question about the frontier between over-regulating or under-regulating. We need to have regulation at least to protect those who are weak people, child to protect girls against harassment. We need to protect those who are weak. We need some regulation, but avoid to put unnecessary regulation that will also block those who need those data to improve, to innovate, and to provide for us a better services. There is a lot of people who really need a specific attention. There's the first question of our people with the disability. We have to make those big tech think about everyone. And they are big because of us. They are big because of the people. They are not big by themselves. They are big because of us. And us with country, how we can force them to implement the policy? They are big, but sometimes you find a company like Meta or another company, Google and what, their budget, their annual budget, their revenue, they can be even more than the budget of a country. I will not take an example, let's say like the Lesotho. Lesotho itself, it will be very hard for him to fight with those big tech. But if we collaborate, we do it together as a region, as a continent. Once we think about continent, Meta will see not only the Lesotho, but we see also the giant like the Nigeria is also inside. And once one will be have a case against one of those big tech, they will know that they will have the support of the whole continent. That's why we need a framework on regional but also on the continental level. And I will want to close on coming back on the theme of our a forum, advancing East Africa data governance together. I think there's 5 words, and the best is the last one, together. If we do it together, if we work together, we'll be strong. I can give you an example. There was the Malabo Convention, which was voted in 2014, but it entered in force after 9 years in 2023. And how it's happened is because in 2022, we came out with our network of African parliamentarians. We have put in place African parliamentarians. Then we say which country among us didn't sign that convention. And in 6 months, we got the number to put in force that Malamba convention. Together, we are stronger. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, my panelists. I think to summarize this panel, the key terms: collaboration, working together, participation, regulation that must take into consideration the voices of the people. Participation, very important when we have persons with disabilities, when we have border people bringing their voices to such a forum. It is very important because that's the only way that their concerns can be brought on board into policy making. So please join me in appreciating my panelists. I think I'll give it back. Please clap for them.